Standing in the shadow of Notre Dame, with its spires clawing at the heavens and stone saints gazing down like silent sentinels, have you ever felt the weight of centuries pressing against your skin? These cathedrals aren't just buildings, they're frozen symphonies, stone prayers carved by hands that believed every chisel mark was a conversation with the divine. But what if I told you these towering masterpieces hold more than just beauty? What if every arch, every gargoyle, every stained glass pane is part of a hidden language, a coded message left by medieval minds who turned architecture into a secret scripture? Gothic cathedrals are more than relics of faith. They're elaborate puzzle boxes waiting for those who know how to listen. Picture this: a stonemason in the 1300s, his hands cracked from labor, carefully shaping a grotesque demon not just to ward off evil spirits, but to smuggle forbidden knowledge into the very bones of the church. Or consider the way light spills through a rose window at dawn, painting the floor with colors that mirror ancient alchemical symbols. These aren't accidents. They're whispers from a time when art and mystery were inseparable, when every detail carried layers of meaning meant only for the initiated. So why does this matter to us today? Because these buildings are time capsules, their stones soaked in the hopes, fears, and hidden rebellions of the people who built them. They challenge us to look beyond the surface, to see the world as our ancestors did, where nothing was merely decorative and every shadow held a story. Over the next minutes, we'll unravel the secrets etched into these walls, from the celestial mathematics governing their proportions to the heretical symbols hiding in plain sight. By the end, you'll never gaze at a Gothic cathedral the same way again, because once you learn their language, the stones start to speak. The transformation began not with a whisper, but with a structural revolution that shattered medieval building conventions. In the 12th century, master builders across Europe grew restless with the fortress-like heaviness of Romanesque churches, those thick walls and rounded arches that seemed to press worshippers into the earth rather than lifting them skyward. Their answer was nothing short of architectural heresy, a daring new style that turned stone into lace and transformed darkness into cascading light. What made Gothic architecture radical wasn't just the pointed arches, though these became its signature, but the entire philosophy embedded in its bones. Those towering vaults and skeletal structures were more than engineering feats. They were theological manifestos carved in limestone, where Romanesque churches emphasized God's overwhelming power through massive, earthbound forms. Gothic cathedrals whispered a different truth: that divinity could be approached, even touched by mortal hands. Every soaring nave became a ladder to heaven, every clustered column stretching upward like fingers straining toward grace. The real magic lay in the hidden innovations that made this vertical miracle possible. Ribbed vaults, those elegant intersections of stone ribs, did more than distribute weight. They created a stone skeleton light enough to let walls dissolve into stained glass. Then came the flying buttresses, those stone arms leaping away from the building like a dancer's outstretched limbs. To modern eyes, they looked decorative, but their true purpose was subversive. They allowed walls to become windows, transferring the building's weight outward so the very structure could become a vessel for light. Abbot Suger of St. Denis, the movement's unlikely pioneer, called this lux continua, continuous light, and saw it as divine illumination made tangible. Walk into Chartres or Reims Cathedral at noon, and you'll understand why sunlight filtered through cobalt and crimson glass doesn't just enter the space, it consecrates it, turning geometric patterns into living scripture on the floor. This wasn't just decoration, it was alchemy. The builders knew light was sacred currency, and their cathedrals became solar instruments, calibrated to solstices and saints' days, painting the interior with shifting celestial messages. Yet the most profound rebellion was hidden in plain sight. While Romanesque churches kept their secrets locked in shadowy crypts, Gothic architects broadcast their knowledge openly, but only to those who could read the stone. The precise ratios of nave to choir, the harmonic proportions echoing musical scales, even the way columns mirrored celestial orbits, these weren't just aesthetic choices. They were a bold declaration that heaven's order could be measured, understood, and yes, even challenged by human minds and hands. To the medieval mind, geometry wasn't just math, it was the handwriting of God himself. Step into any Gothic cathedral and you'll walk across a living blueprint of cosmic order, where every arch, every column, every pane of glass whispers the same astonishing truth, that heaven has a shape and mortal hands could trace it in stone. These builders didn't just construct churches, they transcribed divine law into 3 dimensions, using compass and square to capture eternity in limestone. Take the rose window, that radiant wheel of stained glass crowning so many cathedral facades. To modern eyes, it's a masterpiece of color and light, but to the masons who designed it, it was a sacred equation frozen in glass. Many of these windows pulse with the golden ratio, that mysterious proportion found in seashells and galaxies, where smaller parts relate to larger ones in perfect harmony. Why? Because medieval thinkers believed this ratio was proof of God's hand in creation, a mathematical signature repeated from the spiral of a fern to the orbit of planets. By embedding it in their windows, they weren't decorating, they were mirroring the very fabric of creation. Look down at the labyrinthine floor designs in Chartres or Amiens Cathedral, and you'll find geometry's hidden language even underfoot. Some trace perfect pentagrams not as occult symbols, but as medieval representations of the 5 wounds of Christ or the star that guided the Magi. Others unfold like stone mandalas, their concentric circles symbolizing the soul's journey from earthly chaos to divine unity. Walk their paths today, and you're retracing a medieval pilgrimage compressed into 40 feet of stone. But the real genius lies in how these sacred shapes govern the entire building's proportions. Master masons used Pythagorean harmonies, the same mathematical ratios that structure musical scales, to determine the height of nave arches or the spacing of columns. A choir might echo a perfect fourth, while the transept resonated with the interval medieval musicians called the divine proportion. The result, cathedrals that weren't just seen but felt, their spaces thrumming with an inaudible celestial chord that vibrated in the worshipper's bones. Perhaps most startling are the towers that seem to grow organically skyward, their dimensions following the Fibonacci sequence, that numerical pattern where each number builds upon the sum of the 2 before it. Found in sunflower seeds and hurricane spirals, this code of life was baked into cathedral spires as if the builders were stretching stone vines toward heaven. When a mason squared his compass against a block of limestone, he wasn't just measuring, he was conspiring with the architect of the universe, replicating the same ratios that bind galaxies together. This wasn't superstition, it was a radical fusion of faith and science. Medieval scholars pored over Euclid alongside scripture, convinced geometry was God's native tongue. To them, a perfect circle wasn't just a shape, it was a glimpse of divine infinity, a line without end like God's love. The square represented earthly order, the triangle the Trinity, and their marriage in 3-dimensional space became a cathedral. Every measurement was a prayer, every proportion a psalm, written not in ink but in the very bones of the building. What's astonishing isn't just their precision without modern calculators or laser levels, but their audacity. These weren't humble craftsmen copying holy diagrams, they were theologians in stone, daring to think they could build like God built. When they set their compasses into soft mortar, they believed they weren't just constructing walls, but uncovering truths etched into the universe before time began. Walk into the nave of Sainte-Chapelle in Paris when the sun strikes its windows, and you won't just see light, you'll drown in it. This was no accident. Medieval artisans didn't just fill their churches with stained glass to dazzle the eye. They weaponized light as theology, turning sunlight into scripture. Every hue, every shimmering panel was a calculated revelation, a way to make the invisible divine suddenly, unbearably tangible. Blue wasn't merely blue, it was the Virgin's mantle, woven from crushed lapis lazuli so expensive it was worth its weight in gold. Red wasn't just color, it was the fiery glow of Christ's sacrifice, glass tinged with copper to mimic the very blood spilled on Calvary. The deeper you look, the more layers unfold. Take Chartres Cathedral's famous Blue Virgin window, where Mary's robe shimmers in a shade so unique it's called Chartres Blue. This wasn't just artistry, it was alchemy. By suspending cobalt in molten glass, craftsmen created a color that seemed to vibrate with its own inner light, a visual echo of the belief that Mary was a vessel of holy radiance. Stand before it at noon, and the blue doesn't just surround her figure. It dissolves the very barrier between heaven and earth, as if the glass were a portal rather than a picture. Then there's the red, not just any red, but the deep, pulsating crimson of the Passion windows. Medieval glassmakers achieved this by blending gold chloride into the glass, a technique so volatile it often exploded in the kiln. The risk was deliberate. Just as Christ's suffering transformed humanity, the fire transformed base materials into something transcendent. When sunlight floods through these panels, the entire nave swims in a watery, blood-tinged glow, a visceral reminder that redemption came through agony. Even the placement of colors followed a celestial logic. Notice how ruby-toned glass often clusters around scenes of martyrdom, while emerald greens bloom near depictions of resurrection, mirroring the cycle of death and rebirth. Yellow, frequently made with silver stain, halos the heads of saints, not as golden paint, but as light itself transmuted into a crown, and those intricate borders of white glass. Far from being empty space, they were considered pure light. Unmediated by color, the closest mortal hands could come to capturing God's untainted radiance. This obsession with light wasn't just symbolic, it was a direct challenge to centuries of dark, cloistered worship. Before Gothic cathedrals, most churches were shadowy places where God felt distant, ominous. But these new buildings declared that divinity wasn't lurking in the shadows, it was pouring through the windows, drenching the faithful in a luminous embrace. The stained glass became a kind of mystical filter, transforming harsh sunlight into a softened, jewel-toned glow, what theologians called lux divina, divine light purified for human eyes. Perhaps most radical was how these windows democratized the sacred. In an era when most couldn't read Latin scripture, the glass preached in a universal language. A peasant might not understand the words of the Mass, but when noon light set the Tree of Jesse window ablaze, its ruby branches tracing Christ's lineage through David's line, they didn't need translation. The light itself was the sermon, pulsing with the promise that even the humblest soul was part of this radiant lineage. What modern viewers often miss is the fragility baked into this brilliance. Stained glass is by nature precarious, a mosaic of fragments held together by lead cames, vulnerable to storms and wars, and that was the point. The medium itself whispered a sacred paradox, that something as solid as a cathedral could be clothed in trembling light, that eternity could wear a garment so fragile. It was the perfect metaphor for the medieval worldview that divine glory could shine through the most breakable of human vessels. Perched high above the cathedral's sacred spaces, their mouths forever frozen in silent screams, gargoyles seemed to defy explanation. Why would architects crown God's house with these demonic figures, their twisted bodies leering down at the faithful below? The church's official answer is straightforward enough. These grotesques were meant to scare evil spirits away, their hideous forms serving as divine scarecrows to guard the sanctity within. But there's another, far older story carved into these stony faces, one that predates Christianity by centuries. Look closely at the gargoyles clinging to Notre Dame or the gargoyle-infested towers of Leon Cathedral, and you'll notice something unsettling. Many don't resemble Christian demons at all, but creatures ripped straight from pagan folklore. Some bear the serpentine tails of Celtic water spirits, their gaping mouths doubling as rain spouts, an echo of ancient druidic beliefs that such creatures controlled storms. Others mimic the horned gods of the forests, their faces eerily similar to carvings found in Neolithic caves. Even their placement feels deliberate, often clustered near portals or corners, the same spots where pre-Christian cultures mounted protective totems to ward off misfortune. This wasn't just artistic whimsy. When Gothic cathedrals rose across Europe in the 12th and 13th centuries, they were often built atop sacred pagan sites, springs, groves, or stone circles where locals had worshipped for generations. Incorporating these hybrid creatures may have been a sly compromise, a way to ease conversion by absorbing old symbols into new faiths. A peasant who once left offerings to a river spirit might now see its likeness carved above the baptistry, repurposed as a guardian of holy water. The church called it co-opting, the builders may have called it survival. Yet the most provocative theory suggests something even bolder, that medieval masons embedded these figures as quiet acts of rebellion. In an era when heresy could mean death, gargoyles became a secret language. Some scholars point to the vegetal men found in cathedrals like Southwell Minster, faces sprouting vines from their mouths, a possible nod to outlawed nature cults. Others note gargoyles engaged in shocking acts. One in Freiburg Cathedral appears to moon the town below, as if mocking the very institution that paid their wages. Were these inside jokes in stone or something darker? The church's stance can't be ignored, of course. Many clergy did indeed view gargoyles as morality tales in rock, their monstrous forms illustrating the consequences of sin. The famous Strige gargoyle of Notre Dame, clutching its head in torment, perfectly matches medieval sermons describing damned souls gnashing their teeth in hell. And let's not forget their practical role. As drainage systems, their gaping mouths channeling rainwater away from fragile walls, a metaphor made literal, with evil literally kept at bay. But perhaps the truth lies in the tension between these explanations. Gothic cathedrals were never just one thing. They were battlegrounds where folk memory collided with doctrine, where artisans smuggled old gods into new temples under the guise of decoration. Next time you stand beneath a gargoyle's gaze, ask yourself, is it a warning, a relic, or a stony wink from the past? These silent sentinels straddle two worlds, and their secrets are carved too deep for easy answers. Beneath the soaring arches and kaleidoscopic windows of Chartres Cathedral, an even older mystery lies underfoot, a vast labyrinth stretching 30 feet across, its winding paths inlaid into the stone like a sacred fingerprint. Unlike the grotesques leering from above, this design holds no monsters, no saints, just 11 concentric circles folding back on themselves in a pattern so precise. It feels less like decoration and more like a divine equation. To modern visitors, it might seem like an elaborate medieval game board, but to 13th century pilgrims, this was holy ground, a substitute Jerusalem for those who could never walk the actual Via Dolorosa. Picture a winter's day in the 1300s, the cathedral's cavernous interior lit only by flickering candles. A peasant kneels at the labyrinth's edge, calloused fingers tracing the grooves worn smooth by centuries of devotion. Rising, they begin the slow, deliberate walk, not in a straight line, but in careful loops and switchbacks that mirror Christ's agonizing path to Calvary. With each turn, they recite prayers, their feet measuring out the stations of the cross as if the labyrinth itself were a rosary made of stone. To walk it wasn't just movement, it was meditation in motion, a bodily prayer where every step counted as a mile toward spiritual redemption. The genius of the design reveals itself in the walking. Unlike a maze meant to confuse, this labyrinth offers only one path, a single, unbroken line that coils inward toward the center before unwinding outward again. There are no dead ends, no wrong turns, just a continuous journey echoing life's own winding path toward enlightenment. Historians believe pilgrims moved on their knees at times, their physical struggle mirroring the soul's ascent. And when they finally reached the center, that six-petaled flower known as the rosette, they weren't just standing on decorated stone. They'd arrived at the New Jerusalem itself, the celestial city described in Revelation, its walls and gates metaphorically mapped beneath their feet. What's often overlooked is the labyrinth's hidden geometry. Measure the path's total length, and you'll find it spans roughly 260 meters, the same distance as the cathedral's west facade is tall. Coincidence unlikely. Medieval builders loved these invisible symmetries, threading divine proportions into every element. Even the turns correspond to liturgical numbers, 34 for the years of Christ's earthly life, or 11 for the apostles remaining after Judas' betrayal. But the most tantalizing clue lies in comparing Chartres' labyrinth to its ancient counterparts. Similar designs appear in Cretan coins from 2,000 years earlier, in Hopi medicine wheels, even in Norse ship burials, as if this symbol pulsed through humanity's spiritual subconscious long before Christianity claimed it. Some scholars whisper that the labyrinth was never purely Christian at all, but a pagan holdover repurposed by clever clergy. Look closely at the center rosette. Its six petals echo not just Christ's wounds, but the seed patterns of sacred geometry found in temples from India to Egypt. By the 17th century, many clergy saw the labyrinths as distractions too pagan, too playful for solemn worship. At Rheims Cathedral, priests actually ordered theirs destroyed. But at Chartres, the labyrinth survived, its stones worn smooth by 8 centuries of faithful feet. Today, visitors still walk its path, some out of curiosity, others seeking connection with those medieval pilgrims who believed heaven wasn't just above them but underfoot, a sacred journey mapped in stone, waiting to be walked one step at a time. At exactly 12:22 p.m., on the summer solstice, a beam of sunlight pierces through Amiens Cathedral's south transept window, striking a single brass meridian line embedded in the floor. For 8 minutes, it transforms into what locals call the green ray, an emerald-hued streak that creeps toward a carved stone lamb at the choir's entrance. This isn't random magic. It's celestial choreography perfected 7 centuries ago, proof that Gothic architects didn't just build toward heaven, they mapped it. These cathedrals were more than houses of worship. They were stone observatories calibrated to the cosmos. Walk into Chartres at winter solstice, and you'll witness sunlight stab through high clerestory windows to ignite specific points along the nave, marking days when ancient festivals once pulsed through the land. At St. Denis, the setting sun on equinoxes floods the crypt with golden light, illuminating the tomb of France's kings as if nature itself anointed them. Even the famed rose windows functioned as astronomical clocks, their tracery casting shadow patterns that tracked hours with uncanny precision across the choir floors. The sophistication behind these alignments shatters modern assumptions about medieval science. Master masons didn't just eyeball the angles, they used complex geometric calculations, often working from mystery notebooks where they'd charted solar and lunar cycles alongside architectural plans. Some scholars believe they employed camera obscura techniques, projecting sunlight through small holes to model yearly light paths before cutting a single stone. Others point to the plumb line of heaven, a weighted cord suspended in empty vaults to measure celestial angles against rising and setting suns. But the real revelation lies in what these alignments encoded. At Canterbury Cathedral, a peculiar offset in the choir's axis creates a deliberate kink in the building. For years, historians dismissed it as a construction error, until an archaeoastronomer noticed it perfectly frames the rising sun on Thomas Becket's feast day. Similar errors across Europe reveal hidden agendas. Le Mans Cathedral's twisted nave aligns with the North Star on All Saints' Eve, while Strasbourg's single-skewed chapel door captures sunset on the winter solstice. These weren't mistakes, they were liturgical calendars in limestone marrying architecture to sacred time. Perhaps most breathtaking is how these designs whisper of older traditions. Many solstice alignments intersect with long-vanished menhirs or ley lines, suggesting cathedrals were built atop prehistoric sacred geography, the Green Ray at Amiens. Its path mirrors an ancient Celtic sun cult's midsummer ritual route. Even the zodiacs carved into Chartres' north portal, often chalked up to quaint decoration mirror star positions during the cathedral's consecration in 1260. The message is clear: these builders saw no conflict between faith and cosmic truth. To them, aligning a church with the heavens wasn't just science, it was sacramental. What makes these astronomical feats humbling is their fragility. A single century of continental drift throws off alignments by measurable degrees. The Green Ray now strikes its mark 4 minutes later than in the Middle Ages. Yet even this speaks to the builder's genius. They crafted cathedrals not as static monuments, but as living instruments that breathe with the cosmos, their stones still keeping time in a celestial rhythm older than faith itself. Run your fingers along the ribs of a Gothic vault, and you're touching more than stone. You're tracing the spine of a silent symphony. Medieval builders didn't just borrow musical terms for their architecture, they embedded actual harmonies into the bones of their cathedrals. Step into the nave of St. Denis, and you're standing inside a physical chord, every arch and column vibrating with ratios that mirror the sacred intervals of Gregorian chant. This wasn't metaphor, it was mathematics made manifest, a belief that God composed the universe in perfect ratios and cathedrals should sing them back in stone. Take the choir of Cologne Cathedral, measure the height of its arches against the width of the aisles, and you'll uncover a ratio of 4:3, the exact proportion that creates a perfect fourth in medieval music. Walk toward the crossing where the transepts intersect and the space widens to a ratio of 3:2, mirroring the resonant fifth of a monk's plainsong. These aren't coincidences. Master masons like Villard de Honnecourt left sketchbooks showing architectural plans overlaid with musical staves, proving they designed spaces to thrum with hidden harmonies. Listen closely to the reverberation in Canterbury Cathedral's crypt. The echo lasts precisely 3 seconds, not by accident, but because the vaults were tuned to sustain the sanctus note of the Mass. Modern acousticians have mapped these spaces like instruments, revealing how sound waves bounce between pillars spaced at intervals that amplify specific frequencies. Some chapels even feature whispering galleries, where a murmur at one end travels along curved walls to reach the far corner with eerie clarity, a literal echo of biblical tales where the stones would cry out. What's astonishing is how these sonic secrets connect to celestial patterns. The same ratios governing musical intervals, like the octaves 2:1 ratio, appear in planetary orbits, a discovery medieval scholars made by studying Ptolemy's astronomical tables. When a mason squared off a chapel's dimensions using these proportions, he wasn't just building, he was aligning earthly worship with cosmic order. The rose window at Strasbourg Cathedral. Its tracery follows the same logarithmic spiral found in seashells and galaxies, nature's own musical score frozen in glass. To experience this, close your eyes in Milan's Duomo during Vespers. When the choir hits a low G, the entire space seems to hum in sympathy, the note lingering like incense. That's no trick of the ear. The nave's length matches the wavelength of that frequency, turning the building into a colossal resonator. Even the gargoyles play their part. Their jagged profiles scatter high notes while absorbing dissonant tones, acting like stone sound engineers. This sonic alchemy reaches its zenith in the labyrinth. Walk its path while a choir sings, and you'll notice how the melody swells and fades in sync with the turns, as if the stones were conducting the voices. Modern recordings reveal something extraordinary. When certain medieval hymns are sung in these spaces, the harmonics align so precisely that overtones emerge, ghost notes the builders may have engineered into the very fabric of their frozen music. Perhaps this explains why Gothic cathedrals feel alive, even in silence. They aren't just buildings, they're instruments waiting to be played by light, wind, and human breath. The next time you stand beneath those vaults, listen not just with your ears but with your bones. The stones are still singing, you just have to learn their scale. Beneath the delicate stone leaves curling across the capitals of Chartres Cathedral, a quiet rebellion unfolds in limestone. To the untrained eye, these carvings are mere decoration: lush vines, twisting tendrils, the occasional bird pecking at fruit. But tilt your gaze just so, and patterns emerge. A cluster of 7 leaves arranged exactly like the 7 stars of the Cathar cross, or oak branches forming the distinct double-barred cross associated with the Knights Templar. These weren't aesthetic choices, they were acts of subterfuge, heresy hidden in horticulture. Consider the Cathars, that ill-fated sect of medieval mystics who believed in dualism, that the material world was corrupt and only the spirit was pure. When the Church crushed their movement in the Albigensian Crusade, surviving followers didn't just vanish. Some slipped into stonemason guilds, weaving their forbidden symbols into the very churches built to suppress them. In the south transept of Albi Cathedral, a capital bursts with what looks like ordinary acanthus leaves until you notice how their stems intersect to form the Cathar chrismen, a sacred monogram their priests used to bless initiates. Elsewhere, grapevines twist into precise geometric shapes mirroring the Seal of Solomon, a Cathar emblem representing the duality of heaven and earth. The real genius lies in how these symbols passed inspection. Church authorities scanning for heresy saw harmless flora, initiates recognized the truth. Take the so-called green man faces peering from foliage in Rheims Cathedral. Officially, they represented the cycle of life and death, yet the way their leafy beards spiral into 9 distinct curls, the same number as the celestial spheres in Cathar cosmology, hints at deeper meaning. Even their placement tells a story. Many cluster near baptismal fonts, as if whispering that true rebirth wasn't found in holy water but in Gnostic knowledge. Knights Templar imagery hides even more brazenly. Among the roses adorning Rosslyn Chapel, one bloom stands apart, its petals carved as 8 equal points echoing the Templar cross. Beneath it, a mason sneaked in something even bolder. A tiny, grinning face with the distinctive flat nose and almond eyes of Baphomet, the idol the order was accused of worshipping. That it survives today isn't oversight, it's calculated camouflage, hidden where only those who knew would look, like the way certain vines at Amiens twist into perfect right angles, recreating the Templars' sacred square and compass. Perhaps most telling are the carvings that defy nature itself. In the cloisters of Santo Domingo de Silos, stone ivy grows in mathematically impossible spirals, following the logarithmic curves found in Templar nautical charts. At Strasbourg, a tree's branches split into 22 perfect segments, matching the number of degrees in the secret initiation rites of the Brethren of the Free Spirit. These weren't mistakes, they were breadcrumbs left by masons who risked burning at the stake to say, "We were here." The message lingers in the stones. Faith has always been more fractal than the powerful admit. What authorities called heresy, these artisans preserved as hydrangeas and hawthorns, knowing truth like ivy, finds cracks in the mightiest walls. Next time you pass a Gothic capital, look closer. That foliage might just be a hand reaching across 8 centuries, pressing a secret into your palm. Turn your attention to the weathered stones along the lower aisles of Strasbourg Cathedral, where faint scratches, almost like children's doodles, mar the surface. These aren't imperfections, they're the clandestine signatures of the men who built this marvel, a secret lexicon carved in chisel strokes. Medieval stonemasons didn't just leave their mark, they embedded entire hierarchies into the rock, turning each symbol into a coded resume of skill and status. A simple zigzag might denote an apprentice who'd mastered basic cuts, while an intricate interlocking triangle revealed a master capable of engineering vaults. But some symbols defy explanation. A 6-pointed star with a crescent moon at Bristol Cathedral, or the eerie Hand of God motif at Lincoln marks that whisper of rituals far beyond mere craftsmanship. Take the H mark found in York Minster's Undercroft. At first glance, it resembles a crude letter, but Mason's ledgers reveal its true purpose. It flagged stones cut by initiates of the Horsemen's Guild, a shadowy subgroup rumored to preserve pagan geometry. Nearby, a sequence of dots spiraling around a central line mirrors Celtic knotwork, a design absent from official guild records, yet repeated across northern Europe. Even more perplexing are the void marks, empty circles or squares chiseled deeply into hidden surfaces. Some scholars argue these were guild blind tests, spaces where apprentices demonstrated precision by carving perfect shapes freehand, while others believe they served as spiritual traps, imprisoning malevolent forces within the stone. The real intrigue lies in symbols that correlate with forbidden knowledge. High on a triforium ledge in Freiburg Cathedral, a mason carved an exact replica of the alchemical Mercury symbol, a crescent moon crowned by a cross. This wasn't decoration, it was a brazen advertisement of esoteric expertise, placed where only fellow craftsmen would spot it. Similar hidden messages emerge when comparing marks across sites. The same triple-barred T appears in Canterbury, Chartres, and Toledo cathedrals, always near astronomical alignments. Was this the calling card of a secretive consortium of architect astronomers? Or something darker? In Prague's St. Vitus Cathedral, a cluster of marks forms a near-perfect Pythagorean tetractys, a symbol associated with mystical numerology and banned by the Church as heresy. Most tantalizing are the ghost marks, symbols that appear only under specific conditions. At certain times of day, sunlight slanting through Cologne Cathedral's windows casts shadows that transform ordinary chisel grooves into Templar crosses or Rosicrucian roses. Were these intentional or the product of medieval stonemasons playing with light as deftly as they played with stone? The answer may lie in guild initiation rites, where candidates were reportedly led blindfolded into crypts to read marks by touch alone. Perhaps the true test wasn't carving symbols, but learning to see them, in stone, in shadow, in the very bones of the buildings they raised. These marks were more than signatures, they were a silent rebellion. When the Church mandated uniformity, Masons responded by turning their cathedrals into encrypted libraries. Next time you pass a weathered cathedral wall, run your fingers over those ancient scratches. You might not decipher them, but you'll feel the presence of the hands that dared to write their truth in the only language that could outlast fire, war, and time itself. Numbers weren't just quantities to medieval builders, they were living codes, divine fingerprints pressed into every arch and altar. Walk through any Gothic cathedral counting on your fingers, and you'll find the same sacred numbers whispering from the stones: 3 for the Trinity, 7 for celestial perfection, 12 for apostolic completeness. These weren't arbitrary choices, they were an architectural liturgy, numerals transformed into visual prayers. Start with the trios. They're everywhere once you know how to look: trefoil windows splitting light into 3 lobes like the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Trios of clustered columns rising in unified strength. Even the very structure of Gothic arches, where 2 curving sides meet at a single keystone, forming a stone metaphor for divine unity. But the most telling triplets hide in plain sight. Notice how many cathedrals feature 3 towers instead of 2. That's no accident. Strasbourg's single spire was originally planned as 3, an unfinished testament to Trinitarian devotion. Even the labyrinth at Chartres folds back on itself in 3 distinct stages, mirroring the soul's journey through purification, illumination, and unification. Then comes 7, the number that pulsed through medieval cosmology like a heartbeat. 7 sacraments, 7 deadly sins, 7 planetary spheres in Ptolemy's universe, and 7-fold patterns etched into sacred stone. Count the radiating chapels around Amiens choir, 7. The tiers of elevation in Rheims facade, 7. Even the staggering complexity of a ribbed vault often converges at 7 key points, echoing the 7 days of creation. The message was clear. Perfection had a numerical address. Take the Great West Rose Window of Notre Dame. Its 24 spokes might seem random until you divide them, 3 times 8 or 2 times 12. Look closer. The inner ring holds 21 petals, 3 times 7, while the outer glass radiates in 7 concentric bands of color. Coincidence couldn't craft that precision. But nothing rivals 12 for layered meaning. 12 apostles, 12 tribes of Israel, 12 months, 12 zodiac signs. This number bridged heaven and earth in medieval thought. Cathedrals declared it structurally. 12 pillars often encircle the choir-like stone disciples, as at Canterbury. 12 lancet windows might flank a transept, their glass apostles standing sentry. Even the humble floor tiles whisper 12's significance at Westminster Abbey. Medieval craftsmen laid out the cosmos in ceramic, with 12-sided tiles representing celestial order. The real magic happens when these numbers intersect. Stand in the crossing of Salisbury Cathedral, where nave, transepts, and choir converge. From this sacred center, count the bays radiating outward, 12 in the nave, 7 in the choir, 3 levels of arcade rising around you. The entire space becomes a numerical altar where 3 times 4 equals 12, echoing the Trinity times the evangelists. Or study the facade of Leon Cathedral, where 7 towers, though only 5 were built, were meant to rise above 12 foundational statues of apostles, a visible equation of heavenly and earthly harmony. These numerical patterns weren't just decorative, they were doctrinal. When a mason carved 3 leaves on a capital or a glazier set 12 gemstones around a saint's halo, they weren't following aesthetic whims. They were participating in what Augustine called God's arithmetic, the belief that mathematics itself was a holy language. To build with these numbers was to reconstruct Eden's perfection, one sacred integer at a time. Today's visitors might miss the calculus behind the beauty, but the stones still remember. Every 3-petaled fleur-de-lis, every 7-branched candlestick carved into a choir stall, every 12-sided baptismal font continues the count, waiting for eyes that know how to read them. High in the choir clerestory of Troy's cathedral, sunlight ignites a stained glass panel unlike any other, a swirling mandala of crimson flasks, emerald furnaces, and golden serpents swallowing their own tails. At first glance, it resembles typical medieval iconography, but lean closer and the imagery transforms into something startlingly precise, a step-by-step visualization of the alchemical great work, from the blackening of base matter to the radiant philosopher's stone. This wasn't just decoration, it was a coded laboratory manual hidden in plain sight by clerics who practiced proto-chemistry under the church's nose. The panel's central motif gives it away, a hermetic vessel shaped like an 8-pointed star, its interior divided into 4 distinct chambers. To medieval alchemists, this wasn't fantasy, it was technical illustration. The same design appears in clandestine manuscripts like the Donum Dei, where it represents the pelican vessel used for circulatory distillation. Each chamber corresponds to a stage of transformation. Negredo blackening, shown as a raven perched over a dying sun, albedo whitening, depicted through a lily growing from a skull, citrinitas yellowing, symbolized by twin lions drinking from a common bowl, and rubedo reddening, rendered as a phoenix bursting into flame. These weren't religious allegories, they were chemical recipes disguised as scripture. What's truly shocking is how accurately the glass mirrors authentic alchemical processes. The serpent circle border doesn't just reference Ouroboros mythology, it diagrams the reflux apparatus used to purify mercury. Certain red glass patches contain trace amounts of gold chloride, the same substance alchemists believed could transmute base metals. Even the color sequence follows the Scala Philosophorum, the alchemical color scale marking stages of transmutation. A bishop viewing this window might see the martyrdom of saints. An initiate saw something else entirely, a distillation sequence for producing the legendary red tincture. Historians now believe Troy's cathedral housed a secret school of clerical alchemists. Records show its 13th century canons owned copies of Geber's Summa Perfectionis, the era's most advanced chemical treatise despite its official prohibition. The cathedral's crypt still bears scorch marks from furnaces, likely not for casting bells as claimed, but for glassmakers producing the very materials depicted above. Even the window's placement feels deliberate, angled so the summer solstice sun aligns with the serpent's head, illuminating the panel while leaving surrounding glass in shadow, an annual moment of revelation for those who understood. This wasn't heresy, but brilliant subterfuge. By framing alchemy as sacred allegory, these cleric scientists preserve doomed knowledge. When sunlight floods through that window today, it doesn't just paint the floor with color. It resurrects an audacious tradition of holy men who believed the path to God wasn't just through prayer, but through the meticulous transformation of matter itself. Tucked between the saints and martyrs of countless cathedral capitals, a leafy face stares back, mouth agape as vines spill from his lips, eyes wild with the untamed energy of the forest. This is the Green Man, nature's pagan spirit carved into the very heart of Christendom. His presence is no accident. From Chartres to Southwell Minster, these foliate heads cluster where one might least expect them, above baptismal fonts framing altars, even gazing down from choir stalls where priests chanted the Mass. How did this ancient symbol of rebirth and cyclical growth, a deity older than the cross, find sanctuary in stone under the watchful eyes of the Church? The answer lies in a silent war between doctrine and the dirt-deep memory of the land. Look closely at the Green Man's many disguises. Some drip with botanical precision. Oak leaves in England's Lincoln Cathedral, where Druids once worshipped sacred groves. Vine tendrils in Burgundy's Vézelay Abbey, coiled like the serpents of Dionysian rites. Others twist into impossible hybrids, their foliage forming Pythagorean spirals or alchemical symbols. The most subversive hide in plain sight. At Ripon Cathedral, a Green Man wears a bishop's mitre made of hawthorn, while a capital in Rosslyn Chapel shows him not as a face, but as a hand emerging from greenery to grip a Templar cross. These weren't naive decorations, they were compromises or perhaps conquests carved in stone. The Church's official stance was pragmatic. By absorbing the Green Man into Christian iconography, they could redirect nature worship toward the Creator. A 12th century bishop might point to Genesis, man is made from the dust of the earth, and call these carvings reminders of humility, but the Masons knew better. At St. Mary's in Beverley, a Green Man's mouth doesn't just spew leaves, it births the entire tree of Jesse, transforming a pagan motif into Christ's lineage. In Norwich Cathedral's cloister, his face is carved upside down, yet the vines grow skyward regardless, a sly nod to nature's indifference to human hierarchy. Deeper still are the green men who defy Christian framing entirely. High in the triforium of Exeter Cathedral, one grimaces as his tongue elongates into a fruiting vine, an exact replica of Celtic fertility idols. Another in Cologne's choir stalls wears antlers merging with the horned god Cernunnos. Most telling are those paired with Sheila Noggigs, those scandalous carvings of female figures displaying their anatomy. At Kilpeck Church in Herefordshire, they flank the Green Man like bawdy attendants, turning the sacred portal into a tableau of primal energy. Scholars remain divided. Was this collusion or coercion? The carvers may have left their own answer. In the shadowy corners of many cathedrals, green men appear alongside masons' marks resembling druidic sigils. At Chartres, one capital shows the foliate head not as a mask, but as a man buried up to his neck in vegetation, his eyes wide with terror or ecstasy, depending on who reads them. Perhaps the truth lies in the stone itself, which remembers both the axe that felled sacred groves and the hands that smuggled their spirit into the sanctuary. The Green Man doesn't just survive in these walls, he thrives, his leaves pressing against the edges of orthodoxy like roots through a crypt floor. Deep beneath the soaring arches of Rheims Cathedral, modern radar scans reveal a hollow space no human eye has seen since the 13th century, a sealed chamber floating mysteriously above the vaults, its entrance deliberately bricked over centuries ago. This isn't some forgotten storage closet. The dimensions are too precise, the placement too deliberate, tucked like a hidden jewel in the cathedral's stone crown. And Rheims is far from alone. From Canterbury's labyrinth of subterranean passages to the eerie ghost chapel detected beneath shutters, Gothic cathedrals are riddled with voids that defy easy explanation. What were these secret spaces really for? Some chambers whisper of practical purposes, like the narrow library hidden in Strasbourg's walls, likely a secure scriptorium for precious manuscripts. Others suggest more theatrical roles, such as the hollow pillars in York Minster that once concealed pipes for dramatic flood effects during mystery plays. But the most tantalizing voids resist simple answers. Take that sealed room in Rheims, too small for storage, too high for easy access, yet meticulously finished with smooth plaster walls. Some researchers propose it was a building sacrifice, a tradition of sealing empty spaces as symbolic offerings, like the ancient practice of burying vessels beneath foundations. Others note its alignment with the cathedral's meridian line, speculating it housed an astronomical instrument or even a relic too potent to display. Then there are the tunnels. Ground-penetrating radar has mapped clandestine passageways snaking beneath cathedrals from Prague to Burgos, some leading to crypts, others terminating abruptly at blank walls. The most perplexing run beneath the choir of Cologne Cathedral, where scans reveal a branching network echoing the layout of Roman catacombs. Were these escape routes for clergy during sieges or something more mystical? Medieval texts hint at ley lines of spiritual energy, and curiously, many tunnels align with underground streams, a detail that would have thrilled water-worshipping druids whose sacred springs often predated the cathedrals. Perhaps most haunting are the blind chambers, rooms with no visible entrances at all. Salisbury Cathedral's scan showed a perfect cube buried in the crossing pier, while at Amiens a tiny void was found behind the statue of the Bowdier, just large enough to hold what? A scroll, a vial of holy oil, or nothing at all, making it the ultimate medieval metaphor, faith as an invisible kernel inside stone. These voids challenge our assumptions about Gothic transparency. For all their luminous windows, these cathedrals held onto shadows too. Maybe that's the point. After 8 centuries, the stones still guard their secrets, reminding us that true awe lies in the balance between revelation and mystery. Crouch before the west portal of Autun Cathedral, and time itself seems to fracture. Here, in a swirling tableau of carved stone, the medieval vision of doomsday unfolds with unnerving specificity, not as a generic biblical scene, but as a celestial countdown frozen in limestone. At the center, Christ presides over the Last Judgment, his mandorla pulsating with concentric rings that mirror contemporary diagrams of the medieval Wheel of Fortune. But it's the surrounding figures that chill the blood. A skeletal death astride a collapsing zodiac wheel, Scorpio's claws gripping Libra's scales as if weighing souls mid-apocalypse, while an emaciated moon literally falls from the sky beside a sun with a grotesquely human face screaming in eclipse. This isn't just art, it's prophecy carved in code. What makes Autun's zodiac portal extraordinary is its departure from traditional Last Judgment imagery. Compare it to nearly any other cathedral, like the more conventional scenes at Bourges or Conques, and the differences scream for attention. Where most portals show orderly ranks of saved and damned, Autun's carvings twist with chaotic urgency. The zodiac signs don't merely decorate the archivolts, they interact violently, with Aries the ram butting Virgo aside as Taurus lowers its horns toward Christ himself. Even the resurrected dead rise not as orderly souls, but in contorted poses that mirror contemporary descriptions of the signs in the heavens, from 12th century apocalypse texts like Adso of Montia Enders. libellus de Antichristo. The portal's architect, the enigmatic Gislebertus, left clues in his compositional choices. Notice how the zodiac wheel aligns precisely with the cathedral's meridian line, so that on the summer solstice, sunlight slices between Cancer and Leo to illuminate a now faded inscription reading "Sic transit mundus," thus passes the world. More startling still is the sequence of constellations. They don't follow the usual order, but instead cluster in the exact configuration astrologers predicted for the year 1300, a date many medieval scholars believed would bring the Antichrist's reign. Was Gislebertus embedding a doomsday clock in plain sight? Modern scholars have deciphered even darker layers. The falling moon directly mirrors descriptions in the 12th century, Vision of Tundel, where damned souls witness the moon blackening before Judgment Day. The screaming sun matches Joachim of Fior's prophecies of the sun's lament during the 6th age of the Church. Most chilling is the skeletal figure riding the zodiac wheel, not a standard medieval death motif, but a dead ringer for the pale rider described in the Apocalypse of St. John, his bony fingers positioned to point at Scorpio, traditionally linked to plagues, and Capricorn, associated with earthly destruction. Yet the true genius lies in how these prophecies were camouflaged. To a bishop, this was orthodox end times imagery. To initiates, it was an astronomical almanac of doom. Take the peculiar, melting constellations, their forms elongated as if viewed through warped glass. Contemporary star charts reveal why. They mirror the distorted positions planets would occupy during the Great Conjunction of 1284, when Jupiter and Saturn aligned in Libra, an event astrologers warned would precede calamity. Even the portal's proportions encode danger. Its width-to-height ratio matches the fraction 7/12, a number mystical texts associated with the years of tribulation. What's terrifying isn't just the precision of these predictions, but their persistence. While we know no cataclysm came in 1300, the Masons may have built in failsafes. At exactly 5:15 p.m., on the autumn equinox, sunlight strikes a hidden mark beneath the zodiac wheel, a tiny, forgotten cross with the numerals 1666 faintly etched beside it. Whether this was added later or formed part of Gislebertus' original design, the stones keep their secret. But one message rings clear: these artists didn't just fear the end times, they mapped them in stone, trusting future generations to decode their warning when the stars aligned once more. Carved from ebony wood or darkened by centuries of candle smoke, the Black Madonnas of Europe's cathedrals watch over their chapels with an unsettling presence. These enigmatic statues found in crypts and side altars from Chartres to Montserrat aren't just artistic oddities. Their jet-black skin, often accentuated by golden crowns and jeweled gowns, hints at a far older story woven into sacred geography. According to researchers like anthropologist Lucia Chiavola-Birnbaum, many of these shrines sit atop prehistoric earth energy nodes, ley lines that once connected Neolithic temples, healing springs, and caves sacred to goddess cults long before Christianity arrived. Take the famed Black Virgin of La Paille, perched atop a volcanic pinnacle in France. Pilgrims still climb her cathedral's holy staircase on their knees, unaware that the staircase's 60 steps mirror the lunar cycles tracked by Druids who worshipped here millennia earlier. Beneath the altar, geological surveys reveal intersecting underground streams, precisely the kind of telluric currents dowsers claim amplify spiritual energy. Similar patterns emerge across Europe. Einsiedell's Black Madonna in Switzerland marks the confluence of 3 underground rivers, while Poland's Częstochowa icon resides atop a labyrinth of quartz-rich caves once used for goddess rituals. Even the placement of these shrines follows uncanny logic. Plot them on a map and they align along the Merry Line, a hypothetical energy corridor stretching from Portugal's Fatima to the Black Madonna of Tindari in Sicily, a path that also traces ancient trade routes of the Phoenicians, who transported dark-skinned goddess figurines like Isis and Artemis of Ephesus. The statues themselves whisper of syncretism. Some, like the Vierge Noire of Rocamadour, hold the Christ child in one arm while gripping a mysterious spherical object in the other, a detail matching descriptions of Cybele, the Phrygian earth goddess. Others, like Montserrat's La Mornita, sit on crescent moon thrones reminiscent of Islam's lunar symbolism or the Hindu goddess Kali. Even their coloration defies simple explanation. While church tradition claims the wood darkened from candle soot or chemical reactions, laboratory analyses on statues like the Black Madonna of Altötting reveal intentional pigmenting with iron oxide and charred bone, materials associated with alchemical transformation and chthonic rites. Perhaps most provocative are the rituals still performed at these sites. At Vichy's Cathedral, pilgrims press coins into the Black Madonna's base, a custom identical to offerings made to the Gallic goddess Sequana at nearby healing springs. In Loreto, Italy, the statue's subterranean chamber contains an ancient well where visitors lower cloth to absorb holy water that chemical tests show contains high levels of lithium, a mineral long associated with prophetic visions. These aren't coincidences, they're cultural palimpsests where medieval Christianity overwrote but never fully erased far older traditions. The energy line theory gains credence when examining cathedral construction. Chartres' Black Madonna crypt aligns with the summer solstice sunrise, but also sits directly above a prehistoric dolmen chamber. Ground scans at Guadalupe's Basilica reveal its Black Virgin statue stands atop a network of tunnels echoing the sacred caves of the Spanish goddess Aticina. Even skeptics can't dismiss how these sites generate measurable physical effects. Electromagnetic anomalies at Jasna Gora's shrine match patterns found at Stonehenge, while the air above the Black Madonna of Czestochowa's altar shows higher ionization levels, the same phenomenon reported at Greece's Delphi oracle site. What began as architectural curiosity now hints at a stunning possibility, that Gothic cathedrals weren't just built to honor Christian dogma, but to harness and redirect primordial earth energies their builders barely understood. The Black Madonnas may be the linchpin's dark goddesses in Marian disguise, still channeling power through the veins of the land, their secrets coded in the very stones pilgrims kiss today. Whether venerated as saints or survivals, their presence challenges us to reconsider where devotion truly begins and how deep its roots might go. Step inside the Temple Church in London, and you'll find yourself standing in a perfect circle beneath a vaulted dome, an architectural choice that would be baffling if not for the Crusader knights who commissioned it. This isn't just a pretty design, it's a direct echo of Jerusalem's Dome of the Rock, the Islamic shrine the Templars guarded for decades. Across Europe, Templar-built churches share this uncanny geometry: octagonal naves, circular sanctuaries, and 12-sided chapels that defy conventional Christian architecture. These shapes weren't accidents, they were silent declarations of a brotherhood that had touched something profound in the East and smuggled it home in stone. Look closer at these structures and the patterns deepen. The Templars' obsession with the number 8 wasn't just aesthetic, it was esoteric. 8 symbolizes regeneration in baptismal fonts, but it also mirrors the octagonal footprint of the Dome of the Rock, where medieval tradition held that King Solomon's temple once stood. When Templars built churches like Leon's octagonal chapel or Portugal's Convento de Cristo, they weren't copying Islamic architecture, they were encoding their own lost history. Even the orientation of these buildings whispers secrets. Most Christian churches face east toward Jerusalem, but many Templar chapels tilt slightly off-axis, some aligning with sunrise on feast days of John the Baptist, their patron saint, others pointing toward ancient ley lines. The real giveaway lies in the details. In Tama, Portugal, the Charola, the Templars' initiation chapel, is a perfect rotunda with a hidden second floor. Historians long assumed this upper chamber was a choir loft until someone noticed the narrow slits in its walls. They don't face the altar below. Instead, they frame specific stars visible only during the autumn equinox, the traditional start of the Templar liturgical year. Similar star windows appear in Segovia's Vera Cruz Church, another 12-sided Templar site, where the winter solstice sun pierces through a tiny aperture to illuminate a carving of the Lamb of God at noon. These weren't decorative flourishes, they were celestial compasses turning stone into sacred timekeeping devices. Stranger still are the architectural elements that seem to serve no practical purpose. Take the odd protruding apses in Cresac's Templar chapel, which create an irregular, almost cloverleaf floor plan. At first glance, they disrupt the harmony. But overlay the design with the Kabbalistic tree of life, and something miraculous happens. The apses align exactly with the spheres of Jebura, Chesed, and Tifareth, the same divine attributes Templar knights would have encountered in Jewish mysticism during their Jerusalem tenure. Even the famed Templar crosses, carved into walls, often double as clandestine measuring tools. Their arms correspond to the dimensions of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre's altar, a silent rebuke to Rome's authority. The most provocative evidence, though, might be what's missing. Unlike typical medieval churches, Templar sites often lack conventional iconography. No scenes of hell or judgment adorn their walls. Instead, you'll find cryptic vegetation, vines twisting into Hebrew letters, flowers blooming in geometric patterns matching Sufi meditation diagrams. At Rowan's Templar commandery, the ceiling bosses depict not saints but alchemical symbols: lions devouring suns, eagles clutching serpents, imagery straight from Hermetic texts banned by the Church. These silent substitutions speak volumes. When the Templars needed to hide their beliefs, they didn't erase them. They built them into the very bones of their chapels, trusting that those who knew how to look would understand. Perhaps that's the ultimate lesson of these structures. They weren't just places of worship, but living libraries, their walls, windows, and even floor tiles forming a three-dimensional grimoire of the Order's forbidden knowledge. Next time you stand in a Templar chapel, don't just look at the architecture. Let it look back at you. Those peculiar angles and odd alignments might just be the ghosts of a forgotten faith, frozen in stone but still whispering to those who know how to listen. Beneath the soaring arches of Chartres Cathedral, something older than Christianity hums through the stones. The famous labyrinth embedded in the nave floor isn't just a medieval curiosity. It sits directly above a prehistoric well, its spiraling path mirroring the exact dimensions of ancient Celtic sun symbols found carved into nearby menhirs. This isn't coincidence, it's evidence of a startling pattern emerging across Europe's Gothic masterpieces. Many were deliberately grafted onto pre-existing sacred sites, their foundations cradling secrets far older than the Church. Take Mont St. Michael's Abbey, perched dramatically on a tidal island. For centuries, pilgrims marveled at how its chapels align perfectly with both solstice sunrises and the Archangel Michael's feast day. But recent ground-penetrating radar revealed something even more astonishing. Beneath the Gothic splendor lie the remains of a Neolithic stone circle, its monoliths positioned to track lunar standstills. Even the abbey's winding Grand Rue follows the same sinuous path as processional ways found in Bronze Age ritual complexes. Was this sacred geography accidentally preserved, or were medieval monks tapping into something far older? The clues multiply when examining alignment anomalies. Exeter Cathedral's high altar sits 3 degrees off true east, a glaring error for builders who measured celestial angles with such precision. Yet when archaeologists overlaid the site's original survey, the discrepancy vanished. The altar points precisely to where the winter solstice sun rose in 3000 B.C., aligning with a nearby prehistoric stone row. Similar quirks appear at Rheims, where the cathedral's facade doesn't face the town square as expected, but instead targets a distant dolmen on the autumnal equinox. These aren't mistakes, they're architectural palimpsests where Gothic geometry converses with megalithic memory. What's truly radical is the structural evidence. At York Minster, masons reused Roman columns in the crypt, a common practice, but core samples from its central piers contained something inexplicable: chunks of bluestone identical to Stonehenge's pillars, quarried from Wales' Preseli Hills. How did Neolithic monoliths wind up embedded in 13th century foundations? The answer might lie in medieval chronicles describing witch stones being ritually buried under new churches to bind their power. Canterbury Cathedral's walls tell a similar story. Their lower courses contain repurposed sarsen stones with telltale Neolithic cup and ring marks, carefully positioned to form a hidden protective ring around the choir. The most compelling proof emerges from energy mapping. Dowsers and physicists have independently detected unusual electromagnetic patterns at sites like Chartres and Amiens, pulses strongest where medieval altars intersect with prehistoric ley lines. In 2019, researchers at Cologne Cathedral made a startling discovery. The Shrine of the Three Kings emits measurable infrasound frequencies at 18 Hz, the same resonant frequency found in Newgrange's chambered tomb and Machu Picchu's Temple of the Sun. This isn't mystical speculation, it's physics. The Gothic builders may have unknowingly inherited acoustically charged locations, their vaults amplifying vibrational properties first harnessed by Stone Age shamans. Perhaps the most tantalizing clues hide in plain sight. Next time you visit a Gothic cathedral, look down. Many retain their original medieval floor tiles, and some, like those at St. Denis, depict labyrinthine patterns identical to Bronze Age petroglyphs. Others, like Gloucester's cloister tiles, form coded arrays of dots and lines that correspond to megalithic star maps. Even the stained glass holds secrets. Spectral analysis of Chartres' famous blue windows revealed trace amounts of crushed malachite, a copper carbonate pigment also found in Neolithic cave paintings across France. These cathedrals weren't just built upon ancient sites, they were reverse engineered from them, their architects consciously or unconsciously replicating sacred geometries that had pulsed through these locations for millennia. The masons may have thought they were building for God, but the land itself remembered older gods, and in the silent language of aligned stones and trapped starlight, that memory still whispers. In the shadowy cloisters of medieval monasteries, a chilling legend was whispered among stonemasons, the tale of Theophilus of Adana, a humble church builder who traded his soul for forbidden knowledge. The story survives in stained glass at Sens Cathedral and carved capitals from Chartres to Freiburg, depicting a robed figure kneeling before a horned demon. But this wasn't just folklore. To the guildsmen shaping Europe's cathedrals, Theophilus' bargain represented a terrifying truth, that the line between divine inspiration and diabolical cunning was as thin as a mason's chisel edge. According to 13th century manuscripts, Theophilus was a master craftsman driven to despair by rivals. In his desperation, he summoned Satan through a Jewish necromancer, a detail revealing period prejudices, and signed a contract in blood for architectural secrets no mortal should know. The devil delivered. Suddenly, Theophilus could calculate vault stresses instinctively, carve stone with uncanny precision, and design structures that defied physics. His churches rose faster and grander than any before, their spires clawing the sky with almost predatory grace. But the price emerged in the details: grotesques leering from odd angles, hidden faces in foliage smirking toward hell, and pillars that groaned ominously at dusk as if bearing unnatural loads. Historians trace this legend to earlier Faustian myths, but its persistence in Mason lore suggests deeper unease. Certain carvings fuel the speculation. At Lincoln Cathedral, a mischievous imp perches high in the angel choir, far too skilled to be a simple doodle, its anatomical precision suggesting knowledge of human musculature that medieval medicine lacked. Even more unsettling are the demon builders carved into the misericords of Ely Cathedral, twisted figures holding dividers and squares like perversions of sacred geometry, their tools warped just enough to feel wrong. The church's response was telling. Instead of destroying these heretical carvings, clerics often preserved them as moral warnings. The most revealing example hides in the Triforium of Notre Dame de Paris, where a small demon grips a builder's compass while whispering in his ear, an exact visual echo of Theophilus' legend. Its placement is no accident, directly above the south portal where masons gathered, as if watching over their craft with both admonition and a strange kind of pride. Modern engineers offer a prosaic explanation. These demonic details often mark structural innovations. The imp at Lincoln sits precisely where the weight distribution changes for the choir's daring pendant vaults. Strasbourg Cathedral's infamous temptation capital, showing a demon teaching geometry, flanks the first use of logarithmic spirals in tracery. Were these carvings inside jokes about the risks of pushing boundaries? Or something darker, perhaps the truth lies in the parchment-thin contracts still preserved in some Mason lodges, their wax seals stamped with strange symbols. One from Vienna's Stephansdom includes an unusual clause. The master builder swears to seek knowledge only through God and good geometry, a phrase absent from earlier documents. Like Theophilus' legend, it hints at a time when creating beauty teetered on the edge of hubris, and every cathedral rose as both a prayer and a perilous gamble with forces beyond mortal reckoning. Villard de Honnecourt's sketchbook reads like a medieval reboot of Leonardo da Vinci's notebooks, except it predates the Renaissance by 3 centuries. Flipping through its parchment pages, you'll stumble upon something that defies explanation. Intricate diagrams of perpetual motion machines, precise geometric constructions for doubling a cube, a problem unsolvable with the era's math, and most baffling of all, detailed plans for a working mechanical angel, its wings engineered to flap via hidden counterweights. How did a 13th century French architect conceive designs that wouldn't be realized until the Industrial Revolution? The answer might lie in the sketchbook's own cryptic marginalia. I have been in many lands, but never saw such wonders save by divine revelation. Honnecourt wasn't alone in his claims of supernatural tutoring. The notebooks of Matthias Rorixa, a German master mason, include instructions for constructing Gothic spires using the quadrature, a method of sacred geometry that allegedly came to him in a dream where an angel pressed a compass into his hand. Even more intriguing are the cathedral foundation legends, like the tale of Saint Hugh of Lincoln, who supposedly received the entire layout of his cathedral from a heavenly stranger drawing in the dirt with a staff. Modern scholars dismiss these as pious fictions, but the architectural evidence gives pause. Take Honnecourt's exact method for calculating vault thrusts, a technique that matches 20th century engineering formulas but relies on proportions medieval mathematicians hadn't yet discovered. Or his perfectly rendered perspective drawings, a skill that wouldn't be formally developed until Brunelleschi's experiments 200 years later. The sketchbook's most haunting page shows a reconstruction of Solomon's temple, not as a biblical artist might imagine it, but with startling precision. Columns tapered to counteract optical illusion, ventilation shafts matching descriptions in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and an altar aligned to celestial events lost to history when Honnecourt was alive. This isn't guesswork. His annotations specify proportions down to the finger's breadth, citing measures shown to me by the brethren of the East. Some historians whisper this refers to exiled Templar knights returning from Jerusalem with forgotten knowledge. Others note eerie parallels between his temple designs and contemporary accounts of the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, a scientific hub whose scholars had access to Greek texts Europe wouldn't rediscover for centuries. Then there are the machines. Pages 42 and 43 depict a water-powered sawmill, with an automatic feed mechanism technology not seen in Europe until the 1600s. Another shows an eternal lamp powered by capillary action and a self-filling reservoir, its principle identical to modern hydraulic systems. Most bizarre is his eagle automaton, a bird designed to turn its head toward the Eucharistic host during Mass, mimicking the behavior of living creatures. When MIT engineers built a replica in 2012, they found it worked flawlessly using only 13th century materials. The Church's response to these innovations was telling. While theologians debated whether machines could truly adore the sacrament, bishops quietly commissioned them. Strasbourg Cathedral's famous astronomical clock, with its crowing rooster and procession of apostles, was directly inspired by Honnecourt's designs. At Vienna's Stephansdom, the pulpit's intractable spiral staircase follows his notebook sketches exactly, its unsupported helix defying gravity through hidden stone tendons. These weren't just clever gadgets, they were theological statements, proof that divine order could be reverse-engineered through geometry and gear trains. Perhaps the sketchbook's greatest mystery isn't its prescience but its purpose. Unlike Renaissance pattern books, Honnecourt's wasn't meant for students. The pages are crammed with personal ciphers and odd warnings like "Beware the third measure" or "The lion's share lies west." Some pages show construction shortcuts later deemed heretical, like his method for faking delicate tracery by painting shadows onto flat stone. Was this a craftsman's private manifesto, a coded guild text, or something stranger, a reliquary for knowledge too dangerous to share openly, left like breadcrumbs for future initiates? One clue lingers in Canterbury Cathedral's crypt, where a forgotten carving shows a hooded figure, likely Honnecourt himself, holding a sketchbook while a celestial hand adjusts his compass. The Latin inscription reads, "Scientia in flat, knowledge puffs up." It's a biblical warning against pride, yet the mason's face bears an expression not of humility, but fierce concentration, as if balancing revelation against ruin. That tension pulses through every Gothic vault, the unshakable faith that heaven's secrets could be measured, and the terrified awe of those who learn just enough to know how much they'd never understand. Tucked high above the nave in Canterbury Cathedral, a stone capital hides in plain sight, carved not with saints or angels, but with a scene so shockingly human it stops modern visitors mid-step. A fox dressed in priestly robes preaches to a flock of geese, their necks craned upward in gullible devotion. This savage medieval satire, carved around 1220, wasn't some rogue mason's prank. It was part of an entire visual language hidden in the most sacred spaces, where biblical parables collided with peasant wit, and sacred lessons came laced with subversive laughter. These storytelling capitals functioned as frozen sermons, their spiraling surfaces crammed with layered narratives. At Vézelay Abbey, one capital condenses the entire Exodus into 12 inches of limestone Pharaoh's army as tiny drowning figures beneath wavy lines representing the Red Sea, while Moses' raised arms form the capital's very corners. The genius lies in the perspective. Viewed from below by illiterate worshippers, the carving's exaggerated proportions made the story legible even in flickering candlelight. But look closer, and secular scenes creep in: a farmer mid-sneeze beside the parting waters, a tipsy baker spilling his loaf basket. These weren't mistakes, but intentional grounding of the divine in everyday life. The real surprises lurk in the margins. At St. Lazare Cathedral in Autun, a capital depicting the flight into Egypt includes anachronistic medieval peasants gawking at the Holy Family, their faces twisted in comic disbelief. Even more startling are the so-called bawdy capitals, later whitewashed or defaced. In the cloisters of Santo Domingo de Silos, a now censored carving showed two monks playing chess while a third, clearly losing, flips the board in rage, his mouth open in a silent scream. Others pushed boundaries further. A famously defaced capital in Strasbourg's south transept originally featured a mermaid exposing herself, while Norwich Cathedral's hidden Folly Capital showed a grinning fool mooning the congregation. What fascinates historians isn't just the humor, but its strategic placement. Crude scenes often cluster near entrances or choir screens, zones where laypeople congregated, suggesting clergy tacitly approved these visual pressure valves. Some motifs recur across Europe like inside jokes. The ubiquitous Polarius, a man yanked backward by demons via a rope around his genitals, appeared from Spain to Sweden, always positioned near depictions of gluttony or greed. The message was clear: sin wasn't abstract but viscerally, laughably human. Yet the most profound capitals blend sacred and profane seamlessly. In Poitiers Cathedral, a scene of Jonah swallowed by the whale shares space with a vignette of drunkards toppling from a tavern bench, both stories of deliverance through humiliation. At Cluny, now lost capitals showed Samson fighting the lion beside a farmer wrestling a pig, their poses mirroring each other to equate biblical heroism with agrarian struggle. This wasn't blasphemy, it was theology made tangible, heaven refracted through the prism of mud and mead. Modern restorations reveal how later generations sanitized these stones. Infrared scans at Chartres detected vestiges of paint on a scrubbed capital, originally depicting a nun playing a lute for a donkey in monk's robes. Its satire against clerical vanity, now visible only as ghostly pigment under the surface. Elsewhere, Victorian prudery literally defaced history. Bristol Cathedral's acrobat capital, showing a contortionist forming a living human wheel, was chiseled into geometric abstraction by 1850. The survival of uncensored examples proves their importance. In Kilpeck Church's famous oral sex capital, the scandalous figures remain intact because they double as a theological pun. The entwined bodies forming the Hebrew letter Shin, symbolizing divine presence. That dual purpose captures medieval mindset perfectly. Nothing was purely sacred or purely obscene, but all creation spoke in layered tongues for those who knew how to look. Perhaps the ultimate lesson lies in a damaged capital at Lincoln Cathedral. Where the central figure was hacked away by reformers, the surrounding carvings remain: a brewer checking his ale, a weaver at her loom, a child chasing a dog. These everyday vignettes weren't filler, but the very fabric of faith. The stones whisper that holiness wasn't found only in scripture, but in the messy, laughing, irreverent humanity that built these cathedrals and dared to carve their truth into its heights. Those delicate stone ivy leaves curling around the baptismal font at Canterbury Cathedral aren't just decorative, they're a prescription carved in limestone. Look closely and you'll notice each leaf species rendered with botanical precision. The serrated edges of vervain for fever, the heart-shaped foliage of motherwort for palpitations, even the distinctive 5-petaled blossom of St. John's wort, its carved stamens forming tiny crosses. This isn't arbitrary greenery, it's a coded medical lexicon, a three-dimensional herbarium meant to guide both pilgrims and healers to the plants that could cure them. Medieval builders didn't hide this knowledge in obscure corners. They placed it where suffering would seek it out, around the shrine of Thomas Becket. Where the sick waited for miraculous cures, the stone moldings burst with carvings of chamomile for inflammation, yarrow to staunch bleeding, and henbane for pain relief. Even the floor tiles tell a story. At Glastonbury Abbey, the labyrinth's path is inlaid with ceramic cinquefoils, a plant medieval apothecaries used to treat dysentery, a common affliction for travelers drinking contaminated water. These weren't just symbols, they were waypoints in a sacred healthcare system where every vine and flower signaled relief for specific ailments. The real genius lies in how these carvings functioned across literacy levels. An educated monk might recognize the Latin names inscribed in the foliate borders, but an illiterate peasant could still match the carvings to plants growing in the cloister garden. At Hereford Cathedral, the column capitals near the Healing Well display carvings of watercress, a natural antiseptic, with leaves positioned to drip stone droplets into the pool below. Over at Wells Cathedral, the Green Man capitals aren't just foliate faces. Their hair consists of carefully carved comfrey leaves, nicknamed knit bone for its fracture healing properties. The message was universal. Nature's pharmacy grew in God's house, and its orderlies were the stone leaves under your fingertips. Some carvings even preserved preparation methods. In the crypt of St. Denis, a spiral of stone grapes intertwines with ivy, a visual recipe for the medieval vinegar of the four thieves, an antiseptic blend used during plagues. Salisbury's chapter house shows mint leaves crushed under a mortar and pestle in the decorative ironwork, while Exeter Cathedral's misericords depict angelic figures stirring cauldrons with specific herb bundles. These weren't whimsical scenes, they were standardized instructions from an era when most medical knowledge lived in oral tradition. Perhaps most startling is the evidence these carriages functioned as intended. Recent spectrographic analysis of pilgrim badges from Chartres revealed microscopic plant residues, traces of valerian root and skullcap, both carved on the shrine's surrounds. The badges had been dipped in herbal infusions, turning them into wearable remedies. Even the act of touching carved leaves may have had therapeutic intent. The polished surfaces of certain feverfew carvings at Durham show centuries of finger-worn smoothness, suggesting pilgrims rubbed them like talismans. This herbal code wasn't just practical, it was theological. When a mason carved sage salvia from salva to heal near a depiction of Christ healing the blind, he was drawing a direct line between divine and earthly medicine. The plants themselves were considered sacred script, God's words written in chlorophyll and bark, translated into stone for those who couldn't read the original text. Next time you pass a medieval capital, don't just admire its artistry. Run your fingers along those ancient leaves. You might be touching the lost lexicon of a healing faith, where every vine was a verse and every chapel a chapter in nature's gospel. The soaring pointed arches that define Gothic cathedrals, those elegant peaks that seem to lift prayer heavenward, hold an uncomfortable architectural secret. Though medieval church authorities claimed these forms sprang from pure Christian inspiration, the geometry tells a different story. The pointed arch first appeared in Europe, not in the Isle de France, but in the mosques and palaces of Islamic Spain. Structures like the Great Mosque of Cordoba, where horseshoe arches had been stretching toward the mihrab since the 8th century. When Crusader knights returned from the Levant in the 12th century, they didn't just bring back relics, they carried notebooks filled with structural solutions perfected by Muslim mathematicians, designs that would revolutionize European building overnight. Examine the evidence embedded in stone. The ribbed vaults of Durham Cathedral, completed in 1133, suddenly adopted sharper angles than any Romanesque precedent, right as returning Templars were commissioning Syrian masons for their churches. The stained glass roses of St. Denis bear uncanny resemblance to the geometric Jiri tilework of contemporary Persian mosques, their interlacing patterns following the same complex star polygons. Even the cathedral builder's signature tool, the mason's compass, was likely adapted from the kalam used by Islamic geometers, its adjustable arms allowing for precise angle divisions forbidden by Euclidean geometry. The church's response to these foreign borrowings was masterful spin. Cluniac chroniclers like Peter the Venerable quickly invented an origin myth, claiming pointed arches symbolized hands pressed in prayer, a conveniently Christian explanation for a form that had been calculating prayer directions in mosques for centuries. When confronted with undeniable similarities, clerics argued Satan had given Muslims partial knowledge of true Christian architecture to lead the faithful astray. The truth reveals itself in hushed marginalia. Villard de Honnecourt's sketchbook includes a crude drawing labeled Saracen Vault, while Cistercian building contracts specify avoiding the infidel's curves, proof that the influence was both recognized and suppressed. Perhaps the most telling example hides in plain sight at Notre Dame de Paris. The cathedral's famous flying buttresses, those skeletal stone arms hugging the nave, first appeared in the Islamic world as early as the 9th century in the Great Mosque of Samarra. But the French adaptation came with a telling modification. Where Muslim architects left their buttresses unadorned, Gothic builders camouflaged them with saints and gargoyles, dressing engineering in theology. The same pattern repeats in tracery Islamic muqarnas becoming Christian fan vaulting, Moorish latticework morphing into Gothic quatrefoils. This architectural sleight of hand wasn't just about aesthetics. Muslim builders had solved the very problems plaguing European churches: how to support taller walls, admit more light, and create expansive unified spaces. The pointed arch distributed weight more efficiently than rounded Romanesque ones, allowing for thinner walls and larger windows, a revelation for monks drowning in perpetual gloom. The church couldn't reject these breakthroughs, but neither could they credit their theological rivals, so they performed a quiet alchemy, baptizing foreign geometry with Christian symbolism and hoping no one would trace the lineage. Modern scans expose the cultural cross-pollination. Laser analysis of Burgess Cathedral's plan reveals its dimensions follow the ad quadratum system, a method of proportional design documented in Arabic manuscripts a century before its European use. The OG arches framing Wells Cathedral's chapter house mirror contemporaneous Mamluk architecture so precisely, scholars now suspect direct craftsman exchange. Even the famous dogtooth moldings of English Gothic turn out to be stylized versions of the arabesque motifs found in the Alhambra, the ultimate irony. While clerics denied Islamic influence, the builders themselves left clues. Masons' marks at charters include cryptic symbols resembling Kufic script not copied accurately, but approximated like half-remembered writing. Some capitals feature peppercorn carvings identical to those in Andalusian palaces. They're clustered spheres symbolizing paradise in Islamic art, but reinterpreted as the seeds of faith in Christian context. Even the cathedral labyrinths, ostensibly representing Christ's path to Calvary, follow meandering patterns documented in Sufi meditation guides. What began as structural pragmatism became one of history's great cultural syntheses. Gothic architecture stands as a testament not to purity, but to creative theft, a soaring lie of originality built on borrowed brilliance. Those vaults don't just hold up the roof, they hold the memory of 1,000 unnamed Muslim masons whose genius was Christianized, canonized, and carved into the very bones of Europe's holiest spaces. Beneath layers of whitewash and centuries of candle soot, the walls of Gothic cathedrals are beginning to speak again, not through whispered legends but through the pulse of lasers. In recent years, LiDAR scanners humming across vaulted ceilings have peeled back time like parchment, revealing hidden geometries and long-lost frescoes erased by Reformation iconoclasts or concealed by well-meaning restorers. At Canterbury Cathedral, a routine scan of the crypt in 2019 uncovered spectral outlines of a 12th century martyrdom scene. Its pigments faded to near invisibility, yet its composition perfectly preserved in the stone's microscopic texture. The figures, once thought destroyed during Henry VIII's purge of Catholic imagery, emerged with startling clarity. Golden halos detected by ultraviolet reflectance, crimson robes visible only in infrared. This laser renaissance isn't just restoring art, it's rewriting architectural history. When a team from the University of York mapped York Minster's nave with millimeter-precise 3D scanning, they discovered something astonishing. The seemingly uniform Gothic arches were actually a palimpsest of corrections, subtle bends, and shifts where medieval masons had compensated for foundations settling in real time. Even more revealing were the ghost lines, faint tool marks invisible to the naked eye that traced the original geometric plans. These showed the builders had used a complex vesica piscis technique overlapping circles to generate sacred proportions centuries before the method was formally documented. Some revelations border on revelatory. In Chartres Cathedral, LiDAR detected slight asymmetries in the famed labyrinth, imperceptible to pilgrims walking its path, but mathematically significant. The north side follows a perfect Fibonacci sequence, while the south deviates by less than 2%, a mistake that, when analyzed, aligns with the cathedral's meridian line during the summer solstice. Was this intentional? The lasers suggest yes. Hidden beneath the floor, scans revealed a network of lead strips marking celestial alignments, likely used as a construction guide. Then there are the erased heresies. At Lincoln Cathedral, multispectral imaging exposed a defaced fresco beneath the choir, showing a peculiar variation of the Last Supper, Judas clutching not a money bag, but a blooming rose. This detail, also found in clandestine alchemical manuscripts, hints at connections between the cathedral's masons and outlawed Rosicrucian circles. Similar discoveries abound. In Freiburg, scans exposed a painted zodiac wheel hidden under centuries of grime, its cancer crab positioned exactly where a now-blocked window once cast solstice light. The most profound insights come from comparing scans across Europe. When researchers overlaid 3D models of Amiens, Cologne, and Salisbury, they found identical irregularities, specific columns slightly oval rather than round, vault ribs with consistent microscopic notches. These weren't flaws, but a covert signature, the calling card of a peripatetic master mason who trained craftsmen across the continent. One particular chisel technique, detectable only through laser microscopy, appears in all three cathedrals, a telltale wobble and lift motion-matching sketches in Villard de Honnecourt's notebook. Perhaps most poignant are the scans of weathered facades, where algorithms can now reverse centuries of erosion. At Reims, digital restitution revealed the original expressions of the smiling angels, their faces worn blank by wind and rain, while in Strasbourg, UV lasers resurrected the vibrant polychrome that once made its judgment portal a riot of color. These chromatic ghosts remind us that Gothic cathedrals were never the austere stone monoliths we imagine, but kaleidoscopes of pigment and light. The true promise of this technology lies in its ability to see beyond human history. Ground-penetrating LiDAR at Wells Cathedral detected not just buried foundations, but the faint imprint of a prehistoric henge beneath the nave, its post holes aligning with the cathedral's own pillars, as if the medieval builders had unconsciously echoed a sacred blueprint millennia older. Like X-rays revealing brushstrokes beneath a masterpiece, these lasers are exposing the cathedral's deepest secrets, not as static monuments, but as living documents, their stones still whispering to those who know how to listen. Gothic cathedrals stand as Europe's most magnificent open-air library, but unlike ordinary books, their pages are carved in stone, glowing in stained glass, and whispered by the very shadows clinging to their vaults. These buildings were never meant to be passive monuments. They were designed as interactive manuscripts, their messages waiting to be decoded by anyone willing to look beyond the surface. Every gargoyle, every labyrinth, every beam of solstice light is a deliberate stroke in a grand, hidden narrative, one that blends faith, science, rebellion, and magic into a single architectural masterpiece. Consider this: walk into any Gothic cathedral and you're stepping into a living archive. The rose window above you isn't just a burst of color, it's a cosmic diagram, its tracery mapping planetary orbits. The pillars supporting the roof, they're not mere columns but stone trees, their branches fanning out into ribs that mirror the forest canopies our ancestors worshipped long before the first Christian spire pierced the sky. Even the floor beneath your feet holds secrets, where patterns on the labyrinth reveal centuries of pilgrims tracing paths to enlightenment, their footsteps wearing grooves into the stone like a pencil tracing the same holy word again and again. This library isn't locked away. It's open to everyone, but you have to learn its language. The next time you visit a cathedral, slow down. Let your eyes adjust to the dim light. Study the capitals. Those crowded, leafy scenes aren't just decoration. They're comic strips of medieval life, bawdy jokes, and even heretical symbols hiding in plain sight. Touch the walls where the stone feels smoothest. That's where generations pressed their hands in hope, leaving behind an unintentional archive of devotion. Look up at noon and watch how sunlight slices through a particular stained glass panel, painting a fleeting symbol on the floor. These aren't accidents. They're deliberate clues left by builders who knew knowledge is too precious to entrust to perishable parchment. And here's the thrilling part: this library is still being written. Modern technology is uncovering fresh pages every day. LiDAR scans reveal lost frescoes under whitewash, ultraviolet light exposes erased alchemical symbols, and ground-penetrating radar maps secret chambers buried for centuries. There's so much we're still discovering, which means you could be the one to spot something everyone else has missed. So I'll leave you with a challenge. Visit your nearest Gothic cathedral, whether it's a towering landmark or a humble parish church, and play detective. Does a peculiar carving seem out of place? Does sunlight hit a specific spot at an odd hour? Share what you find in the comments, because this library belongs to all of us, and every pair of eyes that searches its shelves brings us closer to unraveling the magnificent, maddening, mystical puzzle the medieval masons left behind. The stones are talking. Are you listening?